No comment.
What's the reason?
No comment.
Have you been the victim of any crime?
No comment. Shut your mouth. No.
This is a video I never thought I would ever make, and yet here we are. I joined the police as a volunteer in 2015. In 2018, my dreams came true. I managed to get into the police full time, and I felt like a real boy, like a real officer. 25 years old, just got on a career I've thought I'd wanted for quite a long time. And then I very quickly realised that the job I thought I was joining was not the job which I was actually joining. And people join the police to help people. They want to make the world a better place. But what I quickly found out was you can't do that. And it's the police themselves that stop you doing that. Now, before I joined the police, I thought that the police represented fairness and equality. And if someone rang the police wanting help and support, then they would get it. I imagined the police was about locking up bad people and helping the victims and helping vulnerable people through times of need. And dare I say, I thought that the law was equal for everybody under it. And oh boy, was I wrong.
What?
And in this video today, we are going to get into exactly what I learned during my 10 years of service on the front line and why something really needs to change very, very quickly. Otherwise, there's going to be absolute anarchy on our streets. Now, of course, the police wasn't all bad. I had some really, really fun times. There is a great sense of camaraderie when you land on a block. There's a great sense of people willing to help you, to support you with what you need to do and how to really learn how to police and how to deal with the public. Police officers generally get a lot of training in the classroom, but there's only so much law you can learn without actually speaking to a member of the public. And in my opinion, I feel that it should be less time in the classroom and more time actually in company, dealing with the public and responding to live incidents. Just put that back up there, so product placement is fine. Now, when you land on the vision and you land on the block, you do feel like a fish out of water and you are the newbie, so unfortunately you have to make the brews for the team, you have to be the one to go and do the constant observations at hospital, the constant observations at custody, and you very quickly learn that you're not as important as an officer who can drive on blue lights and who has many, many more years experience. But you know what, you suck it up and you deal with it because everybody has to start somewhere. You very quickly learn how to operate under pressure as you are shown a different side of the world which 99% of the population do not get to see. And one thing which you need to learn very quickly is how to talk, is how to speak to somebody, is how to communicate effectively. Because yes, you can have handcuffs, you can have power, you can have a uniform. If you can't speak to somebody, you're not going to last very long and you're going to be very bad at your job. Most of the police officers that I know that have been assaulted and frequently got assaulted were the ones who used to walk in screaming, "I am the police, do as I say," and they couldn't speak to anybody. Whereas some of the best police officers I've ever met, the ones who can really get a victim to open up and they can communicate effectively with somebody, are the officers that are able to look past their uniform and actually speak to someone like a human being. Even if it's somebody who they're arresting, they're able to properly speak to somebody and have a conversation with somebody. But unfortunately, that generally comes with experience. And what we are seeing now is we are seeing a lot of police officers that are a lot younger who are fresh out of university or they're doing the policing university degree and they're not learning how to deal with real life. They're learning how to look at something on paper, and it creates a very robotic sort of police force because you have police officers who can't really think for themselves. You have police officers who don't have a lot of life experience. They are seeing this has happened, therefore this needs to happen. Well, policing's not like that. Yes, you can say this person has committed an offence or this thing's happened over here, but is this the appropriate solution for what we have in front of us? And you only get that through life experience. And also being able to relate to somebody. If somebody is having a relationship breakdown, their marriage is breaking down, they've been married for 30 years, they have children, they have a home together, and the one partner's just found out that they've got terminal cancer and the other one's been having an affair and the equity in the home's disappeared. how do you expect someone who's 18 years old to even begin to comprehend what that family is going through? And what I certainly found was a lot of the newer officers were not able to use that kind of critical thinking. And because of the requirement to have to complete the university degree in order to get the job, you were attracting much less experienced people and attracting a much more inexperienced demographic and younger demographic into the service. And not to go on about this too much, but when you look at DEI, which stands for diversity, equality and inclusion, the best person for the job wasn't being hired, it was the best person for a statistic. And we will get onto how statistics ultimately destroy the public relationship with the police in just a moment. But this is the problem when it comes to public services, is because we want to try and represent the public that we serve, and someone from a diverse background can have a very unique perspective into somebody's life. But the way we go about it is completely wrong. So what happens is, instead of hiring the best person for the job and making the job role more attractive to that certain demographic which we feel are underrepresented in our organisation, we deliberately don't hire the right person for the job who would be the best fit for the public. And instead what we do is we hire the person who's best for the statistic as a perceived representation of the public. So you might get two people, one is from a BAME or ethnic minority background, and then you have someone like me who's a straight white male. Well, we have lots of straight white men in the police, we need more of this X, Y and Z over here. But I might do really, really well on the test and in the interviews and fitness wise, etc., compared to this other person. But because I am considered in abundance and not required, then this person's more likely to get the job. So I do think diversity, equality and inclusion has its place, but I think the way we look at it is completely wrong. And when it comes to something like public services, where we need the best people for the job because it's can quite often be life and death, we need to make sure that we're getting the right person for the public. And because the public pay for the police service, we need to ensure that the public are getting the best service which they are paying for. And the police now tend to deal with a lot of mental health cases, and that is for the simple reason that ambulances are too expensive to send out. The NHS doesn't have enough of them. A police car is quicker and a police car is cheaper, so we'll send the police first, and then if there is anything else which medically is required, then we might send an ambulance out in about 3 or 4 hours. The police are always the first port of call. So when you contact the police and we say, oh, we're too busy, we can't get to you, we don't have any police officers available, like, they're not lying, they're just dealing with other incidents. The majority of what the police deal with isn't crime, a lot of it is mental health incidents. Like if we look here, in 2022, an analysis was conducted, 29 out of 43 police forces revealed a 20% increase in mental health incidents, compared to 2019, which totaled nearly 485,000 incidents. When extrapolated to all forces, this suggested approximately 720,000 incidents nationwide. So quite simply, mental health is on the rise, people need more support, and it's the police that have to go and deal with that. So unfortunately, no, we can't go and investigate your grandmother's burglary, because Janet, who's 19, has been on a bender for 4 days and is on a come down and wants to hurt herself. So if you do join the police, don't expect to deal with a lot of crime, expect to deal with a lot of mental health, and expect to be assaulted quite a lot. Like I said before, the majority of police officers that get assaulted are generally the ones who can't talk to people. However, there are often times where it doesn't matter how much you talk to somebody or how nice you are, how friendly you try to be, they want to fight. And when we do look at police assaults, we see that from 2020 to 21, there were 36,000 recorded assaults on police officers. And again, these are the recorded assaults. The real number is probably much higher. 2021 to 22, there were 40,000 recorded assaults. 22 to 23, there were 41,745 recorded assaults. And 2023 to 24, there were 45,907 recorded assaults. That's nearly 5.24 assaults an hour. So police officers get assaulted, and we get assaulted quite a lot. And by the time you have finished watching this video, chances are there's been 1, 2 or 3 police officer assaults. And from what we can see is this problem is only getting worse. I've been spat in the face, I've been punched, I've been bit, I've been kicked. And you would think that the senior officers in charge of ensuring the officers' safety know about this. So therefore they want officers to be doubled up and to have a partner at all times in case something does go wrong. That isn't the case at all. The senior officers would much rather there be police officers single crewed, so one police officer to one car. Therefore, they can attend more incidents and they can hit more statistics and they can hit more charts and make the spreadsheets look better, rather than have the safety of the officers attending the incidents. There were times in my old force where the radios wouldn't work properly, so it posed a serious risk to the officer's safety. There was one time actually where a police officer was being attacked and he had to call 999 on his phone for assistance because he couldn't get through on his radio because the radios weren't working properly. So your senior leadership knew that the radios weren't working properly, and yet they still insisted on sending out police officers, single crewed, all for the sake of attending more incidents to make themselves look better on paper. So here's another thing which you need to be aware of if you join the police. Your senior leadership do not care about you. You are just a number and you can be very easily replaced. They care about the numbers on a spreadsheet. They do not care about your grievances, your family life, your mental health and your personal safety. As long as their spreadsheets look good, you are secondary, you can be replaced. And that's something which I didn't like understanding when I joined the police, but it's something that came incredibly apparent near the end of my service. And then we wonder why so many police officers are leaving. Well, it's simple. The government hates you, the public hate you, the senior leadership don't care about you, the money isn't very good, the hours you work are ridiculous, the chances are you're going to develop quite a lot of PTSD the longer you spend on the front line, and of course the media hate you, and social media is awful when it comes to police officers. Police forces now are really struggling to retain officers. In the last 12 months alone, over 5,000 police officers have resigned, willingly resigned, because the job is awful right now. Like I said, the money's terrible, the way you get treated off your senior management is terrible. You never get a day off because so many staff are leaving, so that means the staff involved currently still doing the job then have to pick up extra shifts and have to do longer shifts. But one of the biggest things for me was the reason why I left. It was the actual leadership themselves, and one way to really alienate and destroy your workforce is to have terrible leadership, and the leadership I had was truly, truly awful. And this was under the guise of helping people. This was under the guise of statistics, in particular around the area of domestic violence, because it was an easy one to justify. In order to arrest somebody, you don't just need an offence, you have to have a necessity to arrest somebody. Simply just suspecting someone of an offence is not enough to actually arrest them. Otherwise, you could arrest somebody for littering, you could arrest somebody for going through a red light, you could arrest someone for absolutely anything, simply because you think they may have done something. No, we need a necessity to do so. There has to be a legitimate reason why this person needs to have their liberty taken away and why this incident needs to be dealt with there and then. And when I joined the police, you were able to attend an incident and evaluate it for what it was. You would look at, okay, well, what evidence do we have? Is this just an allegation, or is it more than an allegation? Do we have any injuries? What's the history like? You would do some actual investigating when you got there. However, when I was near the end of my service, I saw a lot of officers who were very inexperienced and a complete change in the ethos. I was finding that there were so many people being arrested with little or no evidence whatsoever. What's happening is the smallest inkling of any offence happening whatsoever, the police were just arresting straight away. They were often arresting the wrong people, they were arresting people without evidence, they were arresting people knowing that the case wouldn't go any further. They were saying it's because of safeguarding, or it's because of this, or it's policy to arrest at a domestic incident. Unfortunately, policy does not dictate law. Regardless of whether somebody has committed an offence or not, is the necessity there to arrest them or not, regardless of policy? We shouldn't be arresting or inventing rules and reasons to arrest somebody purely because of policy. It has to be legal. And the amount of times my old force would have been sued for an unlawful arrest was, I imagine, absolutely staggering. But because the senior officers in charge want a better arrest statistic to make themselves look better when they go for their next promotion, they didn't care. It didn't matter how many times they got sued. It didn't matter how many wrongful arrests were made. It also didn't matter how awful the officers were now being trained in order to not be able to think for themselves and not be able to properly evaluate a case when they go to it, or evaluate an incident when they attend one, or even how to investigate an incident. What also would happen is once somebody's arrested and the defendant has been taken to custody and lodged there, those officers then would pass the case on to somebody else. So those officers wouldn't even need to look at the victim or speak to the victim. In their head, they would go, well, I've enacted an arrest today, therefore my job's now done, I'll pass the case on to somebody else and I will never see it again. Where's the accountability? Where's that desire to need to do a good job and to do the right thing? The case isn't going to be investigated properly, so the suspect's likely to be released without any kind of charge because the officers are not doing their job properly in investigating the incident, and officers are being trained to do something which is illegal. They're not allowed to just arrest people simply because an offence is suspected. They have to have a necessity to arrest, and if that necessity isn't there, then they can't arrest, which means that your tax money is being paid in order for people to sue the police because they're not being trained properly, because they're being forced to make unethical decisions, which is further demoralising the police, which is why so many police officers are leaving, because they have no autonomy over their work anymore. They have to make unlawful, unethical and immoral decisions for the sake of somebody else above them getting another promotion. The system is an absolute shit show, and it is insane that this is actually happening. This is like a dystopian novel. You think and do the wrong thing, you are punished for it. The people involved in doing it don't want to do it, but they're being made to by somebody else. So if you were thinking of joining the police, just know it is your power. It is your power to arrest somebody. If you decide, I do not want to arrest somebody, you can justify it, you will get your senior officer threatening you with action plans and threatening you with this and that and the rest of it. It's just them getting upset because you are not allowing them to get their next promotion by doing something which you shouldn't be doing. Statistics, they are an awful thing, and they can be very easily manipulated. But what the senior officers need to understand is that there is a person on the other end of that statistic, and I wish I could go into so much more detail because this video will be so much longer. I do talk about it a lot more in my book, The Job's Fucked, and you can look at it in the description of this video, and I really hope you do, and I think it'll be very, very eye-opening for a lot of people. And if I haven't convinced you yet that the police are completely and utterly fucked, and that they are using the idea of domestic violence and helping people as a way to manipulate statistics, then I have one more story for you before we go. I make content about domestic violence and about supporting people and educating people. I did it on YouTube, TikTok, Instagram, Facebook, email. I was really passionate about it because I've been a victim of it myself. I know people that have been victims of it, and I also completed additional training on it too. So here we had myself, who was a police officer, educating and supporting people and raising awareness about domestic violence. We had the police force I worked for who wanted people to be aware and to support people and wanted us to take positive action and to arrest perpetrators of domestic violence. I thought, oh, what a great fit this is. I was called into my senior officer's office and I was told, under no circumstances am I allowed to continue making content surrounding domestic violence and helping people. And when I questioned why this was, it was because you are upsetting our partners and they do not like that you're raising awareness about this. And it made sense, because if I didn't raise awareness and somebody found themselves in a bad relationship, something bad had to happen, the police were called, they would get the arrest statistic, the charities involved would get funding for supporting the victim, and they may get detections and everything else. Makes the force look better on paper, doesn't it? If I help people and I raise awareness online, somebody may see that video and leave the relationship and never have to call the police, never need the need of the charities. So by me doing what I thought the force wanted to happen and to support people, I was actually upsetting the force because I was potentially taking money away from them. Because they didn't want to stop domestic violence, they wanted to make sure they punished people when it happened. Because one allowed people to be safe, the other one created money, statistics and job promotions for people involved. I think when I realised that the entire organisation, what I worked for, was a total lie. They blatantly lied to your face and told you that they are advocating for one thing, when in reality they were not. It was something completely different. I didn't like that they were officers who were being not listened to, being trampled on, and being stomped on and being made to do things what they didn't agree with, which were immoral and illegal for the sake of somebody else's promotion. And I also didn't like how hard I was working and how hard other officers were working in order to keep a good relationship with the people we worked with. But due to the extra demand caused by this unethical practice, we were physically unable to do our jobs properly. So the reason why I left the police was because the police force I worked for would rather see you get hurt than somebody help you before that happened. The police force I worked for would make more and more ridiculous decisions in order to improve a statistic and therefore to improve somebody's job opportunities, rather than help the police officers that were working tirelessly every single day. And the final reason was that it got to the point where no matter what I did or how much I tried, I could not help the people who I wanted to help because I was just so ill myself. So there you have it. I hope this video has been informative and been eye-opening. If you are thinking of joining the police, remember what...
With some weird times ahead of us, guys. I sound like a husky, and listen, if I have a coughing fit in the middle of this, I'll probably just chop the video up so you just see me disappear for a bit, because I've had a weird chest thing for 5 days and I'm just coming out the back end of it. It's pretty horrible. But look, right now, the Air Force can't get people to join. It can't get people to fly. And I think Starmer, with his peace thing, wanting to go out into Ukraine, he can't get people to want to do that either. And so let's talk about why that is. I want to do this like in front of the computer so I can go through a few news stories. But right now, literally, I'm struggling. Just struggling. So I just want to try and get this video out real quick, and I will keep it short. By the way, if you want to find news that's unbiased, as Starmer is saying, is that we're going to put in peacekeeping forces in Ukraine. But the problem he's got is he's told every white male, which is the most popular demographic for joining the military right now, that they're toxic and they're the patriarchy and everything else. And of course, what we've seen in the military, especially under Mike Wixon in the Royal Air Force, is unfortunately there's been quite a few people who have got my skin colour and my sexuality who have been sidelined for the diversity push. And we know that's true. I've done videos about it. And so when you're not valued like that, you're not going to go somewhere and join something where you're not going to feel that, you know, merit is going to be the answer. Because there's one thing, well, you know, you want to be in a race that's kind of relatively even. You know, that's all I say. And so I just thought I'd talk about why it's a struggle with piloting. I mean, they're 30% down on piloting. And when I talk about piloting, when I talk about pilots, you know, weapons system officers, everything else, anything to do with air crew. Think about it as other branches as well, like engineers, suppliers, you know, admin, logistics, you know, engine. Did I say engineer? I did, yeah. Sorry, that kind of stuff. It's exactly the same thing. Where anyway, your cohort, your main demographic, which tends to be white men, when they're not joining, something fundamentally is up. And I think it's a bit of a conspiracy. I think we've basically, well, we haven't, because I haven't and you haven't either, because that's why you're watching this channel. But the government has made this country so, like when I was ill, I'm ill, like the last 5 days. And when you're ill, you don't have time for anything really. I mean, what I mean by that is, you're just focusing on like, just, you're feeling awful. You know, there's no colour. There's nothing exciting. Everything is dull. Everything is dulled down. It's depressed. And when I was kind of like ill, and I still am a little bit, guys, don't get me wrong. It's just, you look back, I was out in France and I had this, I was snowboarding. And I had about 3 or 4 days snowboarding. It was pretty cool. I got it on the last day, right? And we're in a town, Chamonix. It's quite a low down mountain town, which has really grown quite a lot since I've been there, maybe 15 years ago. But in this town, or just outside this town, we went to this, I'll put a picture up of it, went to this little cafe for breakfast. My wife and I, before we snowboard, we're old now, right? So older, 50. We just go for a croissant and a cup of tea. The snow's going to be there, right? You know what I'm saying? No rush. And we would leave our boards outside, go in and get stuff. And people would put their laptops on the tables and go and buy a coffee. It was like a high trust environment in this little town. And I just thought, being out there in France, I'm not saying France is like this in its entirety, but in this mountain village it was. I was looking back at the UK thinking, we've lost that, you know, we've lost that connectivity, that cohesion, that homogeneity. And so if you don't have that, if you don't have something worth fighting for, you're not going to want to go and fight. I think that's the big thing right now. That the young'uns are seeing when they look at the military. Now, not all of them. People write to me all the time saying, Tim, I really want to join the military. I've got a lot of guys writing to me at the moment, frustrated with the process of getting in. So there are people that still want to do it. I think the issue is, you may still get people into the military. I think the military is far too small. It can't support itself overseas on any more than one operation. But also, I think people look back at like Iraq and the lies that we're told about that, or Afghanistan and the ineptitude, and why bother with, I mean, anything really. You know, what happened when we overthrew Gaddafi in Libya, and Gaddafi was there to basically stop immigrants leaving North Africa. We can go through every single one. You know, when Saddam Hussein was overthrown, and of course ISIS then formed in the vacuum that was left. I mean, everything about it, everything we've done, people realise it's been pointless and useless, and our whole attempts have been vacuous. There is no reason for it other than to prop up some defence shareholder. And I sound awful when I say I sound awful anyway, but I don't want to be that kind of critic. I understand that the processes work like that. Like, if you remember, there was an aide of Gorbachev, I can't remember his name, that actually turned around to America back in the late 80s and said, you know, what we've done in Russia now is we've just deprived you of an enemy, when he broke up the USSR and stuff. And that's really damaging to do that to a country. And I was thinking about this when I was out in France, looking back at the UK, thinking we've got to have an enemy. Not that I want one, but the UK has to have one. It's like Starmer needs to have Russia as an enemy. The Great Game. Like, Starmer wants to be this Thatcherite politician. His rating is so low, it's through the floor. He almost needs a war. And so even though I'm talking about how hard it is to rectify this issue with the Air Force, you know, it's all linked to politics, because we've got to get guys in there to the military. We've got to train them up. A 30% shortfall of pilots is huge, because what it means is you can't free guys up from the front line to bring them back into flying training. Sorry guys, I'm struggling here. To then train them as instructors. So when I was an instructor, guys would come back to the front line. It took me 9 months to train them up to be a basic level instructor. So your Typhoon pilot, your F-35 pilot, they come back onto the squadron that I was on. My team would train these guys up. It would take a long time. And then they're trained as an instructor, but a baby instructor, and then we got to grow them into being a bigger instructor so that they can teach other instructors. It doesn't happen overnight. These guys have families, they leave, they get injured. So you kind of need a surplus. And we were running lean back then, when I was in, up until 2018. I mean, I was asked to rejoin. But I don't like the way the country's going. So if you don't believe that our motives are sincere, which I don't, then it's very hard for you to kind of serve those motives. Now, here's the thing I will say for guys like in the service as well, because I know you're in the service thinking I'm some Russian shill or something like that. I understand it. I get it. Like, when I was in the service, I had no time to read anything from anywhere. I was busy all the time. Now I'm out, and especially when I was sacked from defence about 3 years ago, I didn't have a job. I had a lot of time to read, listen to podcasts, listen to real experts on this, you know, and read books. I mean, just consume a lot of stuff. And although, you know, I'm not, of course, no one's saying that Russia is perfect. Geez, not at all. But this is just like two brothers out in Ukraine and Russia, just two brothers just smashing the hell out of each other, trying to solve some stuff that has nothing to do with us. There's this kind of feeling that some of the people have in the military at the moment when they contact me and they're saying, Tim, obviously I'm a Russian shill, they're saying, Russia, on one hand, they're saying to me, Russia's weak. Russia's weak, we can take Russia. I'm like, all right, you're valid, whatever. And then in the same phone call, they're telling me that Russia's going to take over the whole of Europe. I'm like, dude, listen to yourself. On the one hand, you're telling me Russia's weak and it can't take more than 20% of Ukraine. And in the same phone call, mate, you're telling me that Russia's going to come across the channel and it's going to invade our shores. And here's the thing. Why are we in Ukraine? Trying to prevent Russia invading Ukraine's borders when we can't even stop a bloody young kid from North Africa coming to ours? It doesn't make sense. It's almost a conspiracy. Like, we need these people coming into the UK right now. So the problem we've got is we've got a lot of young people in the UK that would fight for it. But they don't want to fight for it because they can't fight for it. There's nothing to fight for. We're no longer a homogenous, high-trust society. We're just not. What are we fighting for? Like, if we're not here, are there people going to protect our families in the UK? Because we're very diverse right now. And I've said it for a long time. But I don't believe that diversity is good. I don't believe it's good or bad. And I'm also talking about diversity of cognition.
Guys, the Ukraine-Russia story is still...
People talk about diversity all the time. And then eventually when you say, look, you're telling me you want a black person, why? And they go, well, you know, because I think it's good to get different thinking from different... You're saying, so you're telling me that black people think differently then? Because that sounds a bit racist to me. And then they get all messed up because they don't understand what diversity really means. And then they start talking about diversity of cognition is more important. And I say, well, let's have all white people then. And then they go, well, that's just racist because then you're not letting any black people in. And then they don't understand it. You know, I couldn't care less I really couldn't care less. I just want people to be on message with what British values and cultures are in a Christian country. And that's not happening. And I think people in the military feel the same way. It's like, I don't care who's next to me. I never cared who was in the cockpit with me. Genuinely, woman, man. You know, I've flown with Indians, I've flown with Pakistanis, I've flown with Jordanians, Iraqis, I've flown with Americans. I mean, God, it goes on. Australians, New Zealanders. It doesn't matter. But they've got to be good. I've got to have some influence in their training, so I know they're good. Some oversight. And they were. It doesn't matter who they are, what colour they are or nothing, but they've got to be on message, right? We've got to be doing the right thing. I think we're lacking standards. That's it. I think we're lacking standards in the UK, and that's why this whole thing from Starmer is not going to work. Because no one cares. No one believes him. We know it's just to prop up this defence industry or to hide the spending that happened under COVID, try and get the UK back on track. You know, we know if you... It's kind of really weird. It's like... I'm trying to put it in an analogy that you might understand a little bit better, but I'm not clever enough right now because I'm ill. I can't. I'm just, you know, I'm not clever enough to be able to do it. But think about it, right? For the last couple of decades, you've done everything that the British people have not wanted. The British people have even left Europe because it was an immigration vote. They just didn't want to be part of this bureaucracy. The EU, the commissariat, whatever you want to call it. They didn't want to be part of that. They didn't want to be under unelected bureaucrats making laws that we had no influence in, or very little. So they wanted to leave that. They wanted to leave the EU, and they voted to leave the EU, and they did. The British people left the EU. And so we did that. And so we wanted to bring back, you know, this people in the UK with a unique, cohesive value. We wanted to appreciate each other and be part of something that was ours, right? And then for the last couple of decades, all we've had before and after that was this immigration. Like, I think 2023 there was 905,000 people came in. So which has been fundamentally let down by not only the Conservative government, but obviously still by the Labour government, primarily Conservatism, of course. But it was Tony Blair back in 97, everything from 97, isn't it? Bloody Blair. I'd have these people in front of a court. People don't realise how brutal I would be around this country. I believe, you know, might is right. Strength is power. And people just sometimes need a punch in the face. Me included sometimes. And I get it. People do meet me in the street sometimes and you know, they're threatening, right? But I'm 230 pounds and I'm angry most of the time. I'm okay. If you do meet me in the street, guys, just show me your hands. That's all I'm saying. Which is what happened recently. Just show me your hands. But, you know, we sometimes need a slap to recalibrate. A lot of people don't realise the damage that's being done in this country by their attitudes and also by their inattention, by not speaking up and not saying anything. I think by Starmer and the Conservatives before him allowing so many people to come into the country and diversifying what was a unique and homogenous people, the English people, come on. Who is like us around the world? I mean, I say English because the Welsh and the Scottish and the Northern Islands are so small. I don't want to use British because it's an export variant, but you know what I'm talking about. I'm talking about the United Kingdom here, but who's like us? People argue me online and they argue in English. They criticise me and I'm like, speaking my language, mate. Not the other way around. What England did for so many countries around the world, I just can't understand it. But either way, you know, don't say thanks then, no worries. But either way, you know, we're in this position where now Starmer says, I'm going to, you know, diversify you all like Conservatives did. We're going to break up who you are. We're not going to support your national identity. Oh, and I want you to go and fight this foreign war with the Russians who the British people have no beef with whatsoever. No, mate. And the thing is, I'm old now. I've got maybe 2 decades left max. I'll take those decades if I get rid of this cold, but, you know, thanks so much. But young people are clever. They're not going to get messed around like I was with Iraq and Afghanistan. These young'uns, they know. They write to me all the time. They're proud. They want to serve. But you've got to give them something to be proud in. You've got to do these young people some favours, you know. You've got to give them some housing. You got to get them into relationships. You got to get them some work, meaningful work that pays money so they can invest in their future and grow a family. If we don't do that, we lose this generation and they're leaving. They are leaving. No, fair play, good on them. I'll get a better video out soon, guys. I appreciate it. All right.